Hi everyone, welcome to AA Crash Course Part 2. So this is going to be a mock debrief video. Let me share the screen. Okay. So first of all, I'll explain what is the exam pattern for Audit and Assurance paper of ACCA. This paper comprises two sections. That is, section A is going to be objective test questions. You will be having 3 cases given and each case amounts to 10 marks. Okay, so each case will be 10 marks. So this is split as 5 objective test questions. You'll be given options out of which you have to pick up the right answer. So each question will be 2 marks. So you're going to get 10 marks for one case. You will be having 3 such cases. So practically you'll be getting 30 marks from section A. Okay, 3 cases, and for each case you'll be having 5 questions. 5 into 2, 10 marks. So 10 into 3 cases, you're going to get 30 marks. Section B will be a descriptive answer type. So you will be having 130 mark question and 220 marks question. So this amounts to 70 marks. So total of 100 marks. Clear? Now this video will be regarding section B. I will be helping you with how to answer the section B questions. Main problem with this audit and assurance paper, which the students find it difficult, is time management. They will not be able to complete the paper within the stipulated time. The reason is this is a complete theoretical paper where they don't know exactly what should be written. Either they write a lot or they do not give the exact point which has to be written. Though you write paragraphs of answers, it might not be correct because you don't know what exactly you have to write. So if you're clear with, yes, these are the points I have to list out, these are the descriptions that I have to give, these are the explanations that I have to give for my points, then you can manage your time appropriately and complete the 100 marks. Okay. So that's what I'm going to discuss now in this video. So I'll be discussing a 30 marks question and 220 marks question. Not a complete answer. I'm just going to give you clues on how to read the question, how you can start writing the question, what the examiner expects, and what are the most common mistakes that students make which can earn you 0 marks, and how can you earn complete marks. Okay. So watch the complete video and share it with your friends before the exam so that they also get um, an idea of how to write the exam. Okay. Now, first, I'll explain. See, this is the view of your CB constructed response workspace. Okay, normally if it's going to be an MCQ, you will be having the scenario this side on the left side. Okay, and on the right side, you'll be having the questions displayed. So if it's going to be first case, you'll be having 5 questions based on this case mentioned here. I'm telling for the MCQs, okay, for section A. So at that time, your screen will be changing only for the right side, first question, second question till 5th question. And then like this is your next key. If you want to go to the next question, you can click on this. You can skip this part if you have already appeared for your CB exams. Whoever is new for the CB exam, please watch this. Okay, so this is the next tab. If you click on this, you will be directed to the next question. And once the 5 questions are over, if you click on next, your left side, this case will also change. And then you'll be having 5 questions based on that. Okay, so that is for the section A. Section B is where it can be a 30 mark question and 20 marks question. So your scenario appears here. So these are the questions based on this scenario. So for that, this is your working space. In this, you have to write your answers. Okay. Yeah. And then whoever is new for this CB, you can flag the question here. That is, if you want to come back to this question and then review the question later on before submitting, you can flag the question here and come back. You have a navigator here. Now, this one will help you in selecting which question you want to go back and change your answer or appear for the answer. Okay, this will help you. And you have the calculator, scratch pad. You will be given a scrap paper as well, and you have a scratch pad if in case you want to list out some points so that you don't forget it. You can use this and write it, but make sure, remember that any points listed out on the scratch pad will not be given marks. Okay, the examiner will not evaluate anything that has been written on the scratch pad. This button help will give you the formulas. As of AA is concerned, you don't have any formulas. But for the other papers, you can click on this to get the formulas. You can also carry your calculators or you can use the calculator here. Okay. So this is what I wanted to discuss regarding the CB view. Okay. Now, let's start with section B, 30 marks question first. So, first of all, how do you think you can start reading the question? Okay. I would say don't start reading the question right from the scenario. First of all, read what is your requirement. What you tend to do, what the students tend to do normally, they start the scenario, they read through the scenario completely. So this is an extract of March-June 2019 question paper. So this question paper's link has been given in the description. You can go through the question paper. You can even answer that. Practice at least 5 to 6 sessions of mock papers. Okay. Now, what the students tend to do, so this scenario is actually up to a page. Okay. Then you have been given the requirement. I would say not to read the case scenario first. You can start to read with the introduction of the case. Okay. For example, we have an introduction here. Yes, this is fine to read. But then reading the complete scenario and then going to the requirement will make you forget what you read about the case. Okay. So first of all, read the requirement and then come to the scenario so that you can start marking what is the requirement. Okay. So how you can write the answers. This can save your time. Otherwise, this will lead to reading the question again and again. Now, my first part is for each of the two methods, narrative notes and questionnaires, describe the method for documenting internal control systems and explain an advantage of using this method. Now, from this requirement, I can make a point. So this scenario or the requirement is based on narrative notes and questionnaires. So now I'm going to the information given. Auditors are required to document a company's accounting and internal control system as part of their audit process. Two methods available for documenting internal control systems are narrative notes and questionnaires. So this is normally testing you based on the knowledge area and not applying your skills here. You're just going to, they are going to test your knowledge area. Okay. Now, so this is going to give you 4 marks. First of all, before starting with the theoretical answer, make sure you note how much marks this is for and what is the split up. This will also be given. The total marks will be split equally between each part, which means this first part is going to give you 2 marks, earn you 2 marks, and this is going to be 2 marks. So you have to write your answer only for 2 marks, not more than that. Now, okay. Now you were asked relating to narrative notes, right? Okay, let me put it in this way. You were asked for narrative notes and the questionnaires, right? Now, what are the two things that they asked? It was describe the method for documenting the internal control system and the advantage. So basically you have to give them the description and then the advantage. So as I told, for narrative notes, it's going to be 2 marks, which means it can be split as 1 mark you have to describe and 1 mark for the advantage. Same way, questionnaire is going to be 1 mark and 1 mark advantage. Before starting to write the question, first of all, analyze this. So I'm just going to write for 1 marks. So you have to write only for a 1 mark content. Don't give a big answer and spend too much of time in one particular question. So that's the reason I'm telling you this. Okay. Now, going with a big scenario here, you have a bigger scenario given here and then you have the requirements. My suggestion is read the requirement first and then go for the case. So what is your requirement here? In respect of the internal controls of Frisia company, identify and explain 6 deficiencies. So basically the information in the scenario is going to be related to Frisia company and they're asking for the deficiencies. Okay. They're asking you 6 deficiencies. Recommend a control to address each of these deficiencies and describe a test of control the external auditors should perform to assess if each of these controls, if implemented, is operating effectively to reduce the identified deficiency, right? Now, you have to find out 6 deficiencies. And now what are your requirements? You have to find out a deficiency. Okay. Then you have to give a recommendation and then you will have to do a test of control. You're going to give 6 deficiencies. What is the mark given here? 18 marks. And they have already told you have to mention 6 deficiencies, which means you're going to get for one deficiency that you're going to identify, you will be getting 3 marks, right? So which means if you're going to identify first deficiency, okay, so this is going to gain you 1 mark. The recommendation for it will gain you 1 mark. Test of control is going to gain you 1 mark. See, they have given you this note. Prepare your answer using 3 columns headed control deficiency, this one, control recommendation and test of controls respectively. The total marks will be split equally between each part. So 3 marks will be split as 1 mark, 1 mark and 1 mark. So if you're going to give answers for 6 deficiencies, you will be gaining 18 marks. So your answer should be in a way that you can score 1 mark in each of the columns. Not too high and not irrelevant points. Okay. Now that you know these are the things you have to do, you're not going to read any recommendations or test of controls. When you're going through this case, you just have to mark what are the deficiencies. Okay. Anything other than that is not your part. Fine. If you did not know what is the requirement, you will be reading this complete scenario and then once you read the requirement, you will have to come back again and then you will have to mark these again. So this is going to waste your time anyways. So that's the reason I'm asking you to read the requirement first and then come to the case. Now, yes, another thing that I wanted to discuss was, see, they have asked you 6 deficiencies, right? Now I have seen students who, you have 3 accounting systems given here, basically. Okay. So out of these, the examiner's expectation would be that you provide at least 2 points to deficiencies. I mean, from sales, 2 from purchases and inventory, and 2 from payroll. So that it is made sure that you have read the complete question and you have found out deficiencies in all the accounting systems. Basically, if the question is going to be given, there would be deficiencies in all the accounting systems. Okay. So the examiner would want you to identify deficiencies from whatever accounting systems that has been given. Or if it's going to be a different question where you have different scenarios, then if 3 or 4 different scenarios have been given, you have to split and you have to make sure you give points out of all the scenarios given, right? If at all you get all the deficiencies, you wanted 6 deficiencies, you get it within this sales, purchases, and inventory, you have got 6 deficiencies. Does that mean you can go to the next question? I would say no, because this would give one kind of a negative image that either you did not have time to read the payroll, you omitted payroll from reading the question just because you got 6 points from here, or that you have read payroll but you did not find any kind of a deficiency in this. Though there are deficiencies in this part, the examiner would have expected you to list out a deficiency from this part. But as you have omitted a point from this, it could give an image that you did not find out a deficiency that existed. Okay, that could also create a negative image on your answer sheet. So make sure if there are different number of cases, for example, here there are 3 accounting systems. You give all the 6 deficiencies from splitting from all these listed accounting systems. Fine. And if there are 2 breakups here within one paragraph itself, you have purchases and inventory. Here also, I would suggest give a point. You have to give 2 points here. Give a point on purchases and give a point on inventory if there are any deficiencies. Okay. So this is all you need to know and remember before giving your answer. Okay. Make sure with these things first in your mind and then start reading the question. Now that you know from sales, I'm going to pick up 2 deficiencies. Anything other than that, let me look into it after a complete payroll. Okay. Now, reading from the top. Fresia's company is a company listed on a stock exchange. It manufactures furniture which it supplies to a wide range of retailers across the region. The company has an internal audit department and the company's year end is 30 June 2019. You are an audit supervisor with Xenia and Company, preparing the draft audit programs and reviewing extracts from the internal controls documentation in preparation for the interim audit. Okay. So normally this company has an internal audit department. Don't ignore any small point also. You have to remember each and every point that has been given in your case study. Now, this company which I'm going to audit has an internal audit department, which means they would have controls in place. They would have audited relating to their controls, whether it is operating effectively and efficiently. Okay. Now, what is their year end? This is very important to note. It's going to be 30 June 2019. Now, what am I carrying out? An interim audit or a final audit? That is also an important point. This is going to be an interim audit, which I'm going to carry out in between the year, right? So that is the meaning of interim audit. So now I have to find out the deficiencies starting from the sales. Freesia company generates revenue through visits by its sales staff to customers' premises. Sales ledger clerks who work at head office carry out credit checks on new customers prior to being accepted and then set their credit limits. Now, can you think of what is the deficiency so far? Hmm. Okay, we are looking at section B, first question. Okay, so part A was done. This is B. Okay, so now I'm going to write the control deficiencies, and this is recommendation. And the last one is test of control. I'm writing it in short. Okay. Now, first of all, under sales, I'm going to find out points, right? Now, under sales, the line that we read told us that new customers' credit limits are being set by the sales ledger clerk. So do you think this is a deficiency or not? I would say this is a control deficiency because sales ledger clerk is not a person who is senior or knowledgeable enough in order to set the credit limits for customers. Okay, credit limit has to be set by any senior person and it should also be authorized and reviewed by a responsible official. Right now, I'm telling this is the deficiency that I have identified. Now, is this enough to mention in this control deficiency point? I told this will gain you 1 mark, this one mark, and this one mark, right? So, do you think I have just told them what is the control deficiency? Now, I'm going to the recommendation. Is this enough to gain 1 mark? Absolutely no. If you're just going to list out what is the control deficiency, you will gain no marks. Okay, you have to tell what is the deficiency. Why do you think it is a deficiency? And what could be the impact or an implication due to the deficiency? So these three has to be addressed in order to get your 1 mark under control deficiency. Remember, don't just list out that control deficiency. You have to tell them what is the deficiency. Why do you think it is a deficiency? Now, under this point, I told sales ledger clerk is setting the credit limit for the customers. That is the deficiency. So I have addressed what. Now, why it is a control deficiency? That is, he is not knowledge enough or is a senior person who has the eligibility to set the credit limit. Okay, and there is no authorization being carried out. So that is why I call this as a deficiency. Next, what could be the implication or an impact? Now that sales ledger clerk not qualified enough or senior enough to set the credit limit, what could be the impact is that either there is a possibility that he sets the credit limit too high or even too low. Okay. So what could be the impact about that? If the credit limit for a customer is being set too high, okay, that means there is a possibility that if the customer is not able to pay, it could lead to a irrecoverable debt, right? And what if it is too low? The credit limit is too low, that I'm not allowing the customers to have too much of credit limit, then the interest of the customers towards me and the customer satisfaction will get low, which could have an impact on the lost sales for the company, right? So these are the impacts it could have. So when answering the control deficiency, you have to address on what is the deficiency you think, list it out, and then write why you call it as a deficiency, explain it with a complete sentence, and then write the impact. So explain whatever I told. If it goes too high, then there's a possibility of irrecoverable debt. If it goes too low, there is a possibility of lost sales. So you have to mention all this to complete the control deficiency and get 1 mark from this. Right? This only will gain you control deficiency 1 mark. Otherwise, you will not get the complete marks, and just listing out what is the deficiency will gain you 0 marks. Fine? Okay. Then coming to the recommendations. So what can you recommend here? Basically, I would say there should be an appropriate higher authority or a senior person who has the eligibility to set the credit limits, and whether the credit limit set by the senior is also being reviewed by an authorized person or a responsible official. That is going to be my recommendation. So this should be explained in a complete sentence. Now, test of controls. Test of controls we are going to make to know whether appropriately the controls are in place, right? Now, we can make sure that we inquire with the sales ledger clerk that appropriate who is going to set the credit limits. Okay, is there any responsible official or a senior person who is going to set the credit limit? You can make an inquiry, or you can also check for authorization or review by appropriate or responsible official who has reviewed whether the credit limits are being set by an appropriate authority, right? So these are the test of controls you can carry out. This can give you 1 mark. I think 1 point is enough. You can gain 1 mark, but it should be a complete sentence, right? But make sure for control deficiency is the important part where you lose the marks in this particular question. So you have to mention what is the control deficiency, why you call it a control deficiency, and what is the implication of it. Okay. So this is the examiner's expectation. Okay. You have to address these points. Now, going back to the question. Yeah. So under sales, I have explained 1 point. Let me explain with 1 point from each of the accounting systems. Okay. Going to purchases. You can read through this other part and you can identify other deficiencies as well. Now, purchases and inventory. I told if you have two purchases and inventory, it's better to find 1 point from purchases and 1 point from inventory, right? So under purchases, receipts of raw materials and goods from suppliers are processed by the warehouse team at head office who agree the delivery to purchase order, check the quantity and quality of goods, and complete a sequentially numbered goods received note, that is GRN. Now, GRNs are sent to the finance department daily. Okay. On the receipt of the purchase invoice from the supplier, Camilla Brown, the purchase ledger clerk, matches it to the GRN and order, and 3 documents are sent for authorization by the appropriate individual. Okay. Now, what do you think could be a deficiency so far from whatever we have read? Okay, so this is going to be deficiency, recommendation, and test of controls. Okay. Now, the deficiency that I have found out is GRN is being sent only to the finance department. Why am I calling this as a deficiency? First of all, where does this complete purchases start? Only when the purchase department raises the PO, right? So when a department needs the stocks, they'll be sending a purchase requisition, and the purchase department, if there is no stock, they will be raising a, if there are less need for a stock, they'll be raising a purchase order. So this is where the purchases start. This is the point. Now, GRN is where I have received the goods. Now, sending the GRN only to the finance department, will it be able to check with the PO? No, right? So basically, the deficiency that I have found here is that GRN has to be one has to be retained with the warehouse. One copy has to go to the finance department, that is fine. One copy has to go to the purchases department also. Okay. Why I'm telling it has to go to the purchase department is because purchase department will be able to match this purchase order with the GRN. Why should we match the PO with GRN? Only then we will be able to know whether whatever we have ordered for, we have received or not. And are there any unfulfilled orders? Okay. If there are, is there any unfulfilled orders, and is there any wrong stock that has come in? Okay. So everything can be matched with the PO and then found out. Right. So that is the deficiency I'm going to find here. So what is the deficiency here? GRN sent to finance department only. That is the deficiency. So why am I calling it a deficiency? I will not be able to, because this is not sent to the purchasing department. Okay. So without sending it to the purchasing department, I will not be able to know the unfulfilled orders. So not sending it to the purchase department is going to be the Y reason, and unfulfilled orders is the impact. You will not be able to know what is the unfulfilled order or whether correct goods have entered the warehouse, right? So these are the points I have to mention for the purchases. Then I'll be recommending. Recommendation is simple. That is, the GRN, one copy has to be retained with the warehouse, one to be sent to the finance department, and one to the purchasing department. You cannot stop with that. This would be vague. Okay, because I've mentioned the reason why purchase department needs it in the deficiency itself. So now under recommendation, if the purchase department is going to receive, what should they do? They should match purchase order to GRN, and then they have to flag whether the order is complete, or if there are any unfulfilled orders, they should raise a request on it, right? So these are the recommendations that I have to give. Then test of controls will be checking whether reviewing whether the purchase department has actually matched the PO and the GRN and flagged that all the orders are complete. And if there are some unfulfilled orders, whether the request regarding it has been raised or not. So we will be inquiring and reviewing regarding that. So this will be the answer for purchases, right? So make sure you think about the accounting system completely and then come out with the answer. Only then you will be able to give a complete answer for it. Don't think just listing out a point or just giving a bulletin point as such would not give you marks. Now I told for inventory also we have to look at, right? So this is the part. Okay, for inventory, they have given the company values its inventory using standard cost, both for internal management reporting and for inclusion in the year-end financial statements. The basis of the standard cost was reviewed approximately 18 months ago. Okay. They are telling you that the standard costs have been reviewed 18 months ago. Normally, there is a risk of inflation, right? So when there is a risk of inflation means that the raw material cost would have gone high, would have changed. Okay, they would have inflated. So this is a deficiency that you can mention and you can write through the complete answer. Now going with payroll. Frisia company employs a mixture of factory staff who work a standard shift of 8 hours a day and administration and sales staff who are salaried. All staff are paid monthly by bank transfer. Occasionally, overtime is required of factory staff. Where this occurs, details of overtime worked per employee is collated and submitted and to the payroll department by a production clerk. The payroll department pays this overtime in the month it occurs. At the end of each quarter, the company's payroll department sends overtime reports which detail the amount of overtime work to the production director for the review. Okay, so what do you think is the deficiency here? Basically, the overtime work is not authorized, right? So the overtime work is not authorized is my point here. That is the deficiency that I have identified. Now, why I think this is a deficiency? Because overtime has been worked, and if it is not going to be authorized, it means that either incorrect amount could be processed and paid, or um, the overtime calculation can be wrong, and for the wrong person without authorization the payment could be made. So finally it's going to impact as an increase in the payroll cost. Okay, so this is my point regarding the deficiency. So I have listed out what is the deficiency, why it is called a deficiency, and what is the impact of it or an implication of it. Now what am I going to recommend? I would recommend that overtime has to be authorized before it goes for the payment to the payroll department. Okay, before it is being processed for the processed by the payroll department. It has to be authorized by the responsible official of that particular department. Fine. Then what could be the test of controls? You will have a overtime report where you can check whether proper authorization has been done, whether responsible official has authorized that you can work overtime, and whether the payments are correct. Okay, so you can review the OT reports. So this is the way in which you have to write the answer for this requirement, that is deficiencies. Clear? Hope that part was clear. Now I'm moving on to the next part, that is substantive procedures. Okay. Substantive procedures is also an area where students do not know how to score the marks correctly. Okay, so let me read the question first and explain you how to appear for the answer. Now I'm reading the requirement first and I'll read this. Describe the substantive procedures the auditor should perform to obtain sufficient and appropriate audit evidence in respect of Frisia Company's year-end accrual for employment tax payable. So I'm going to give an answer for 4 marks. Okay. So this answer is going to be for 4 marks. And what am I going to find out? It's going to be sufficient appropriate audit evidence. That is the substantive procedures that I have to perform. So now let me read the point given here. Frisia Company deducts employment taxes from its employees' wages and salaries on a monthly basis and pays these to the local taxation authorities in the following month. At the year end, the financial statements will contain an accrual for employment tax payable. Now my question is asking me to write for 4 marks. So basically your substantive procedures, if it requires to write you for 4 marks, it means I'm telling about the substantive procedures that has to be given. Okay. You have to write 4 points, which means 1 point that you're going to give will earn you 1 mark. So it doesn't mean you can just give a small sentence. How your sentence has to be. Normally, when it comes to this AA paper, never make any bulletin points. Unless and until it's going to be, first let me leave out the substantive procedures question. Other questions, you have to write it in a descriptive way only. Substantive procedures, you can list out the points as 1, 2, and 3 because this question requires you 4 substantive procedures, right? So it can be 4 points given, but make sure this is not a short sentence. It should, or an incomplete bulletin point. It should be a complete sentence. Make sure the points that you list out is a complete sentence. If you write bulletin points, you're not going to score a mark for it. Okay, so make sure about that. And there was a student who asked me if the question is requiring me to write 5 points, can I write 7 points in that place? So that because I'm not sure about these 5 points, so can I write 7 points so that I can score marks? I would say, first of all, writing this 5 points and completing your paper to 100 marks itself is difficult. Okay, so I would prefer if you're coming up with 7 points, you are able to come up with 7 points for this substantive procedures where only you require 4 points. Okay, I would say don't spend your time writing 7 points here because you're ultimately going to waste your time. You're not going to earn any marks. There is no guarantee. You will not gain any extra mark. If your 4 points, first 4 points are correct, you're going to get 4 marks. But for these 3 points, it's of no use. You're not going to get any mark. If at all you want to list this out, just have it in your scrap paper or your scratch pad in the screen. Later on, once you're done with your 100 marks, come back to the question. You have the navigator. You can come back to the question and then list out these points if you have time. But getting time, extra time, that is having much time after appearing for 100 marks is totally difficult. So I would say don't spend time for this. Anyways, you're not going to get any negative mark or an extra mark. Okay. So don't spend your time on this. But instead, the question was that what if these points are wrong? These points could help me. That was the question by the student. So I would say, first of all, when you're thinking in your mind, just come to a conclusion. Whichever point you think is 80 to 90% correct, you think that is absolutely correct. Whichever is 100% correct, list that out first. Then, whichever points are coming to your mind, you have 5 points, out of which you just have to give 2 points here. Just make sure which you think would be 80 to 90% correct. List that out as the answer here, appropriate answer here. Then have it as small points just to remember in your scratch paper, scrap paper or a scratch pad. And then come back to it once you're done with the 100 marks. Okay. So yeah. And with regard to the substantive procedures, another thing that I wanted to tell before going to the question was, don't give any vague answers. I have also seen students who memorize the substantive procedures. So basically, yeah, this could be applicable substantive procedures for this particular scenarios. So they just write the vague answers, which will not gain you any marks. You have to be case specific. Whatever specific scenario has been given in the question, you have to provide substantive procedures relating to that. Anything vague or that does not give a proper attention to that particular case will not gain you marks. Okay, so be case specific. And so listing out these points, there are also some answers where written representation from the management relating to that particular specific thing. So that is a point that is applicable for any substantive procedure. Students tend to write that. Will that gain you marks? I would say yes, but when you would have studied AA, and even in my crash course part 1, I have told the audit evidence that you obtain has to be of high reliableness. It should be sufficient and appropriate. So whichever is highly reliable, I would have told third party obtained evidence is better than the one that you obtain from the internally from the client company, right? So in that way, if you think written representation is something that you're going to obtain from the client, so that's not going to be a very high reliable one. So make sure if you're going to list out substantive procedures just for 4 marks, you will be able to obtain many reliable sources than obtaining a written representation, right? So make sure you do not give that kind of a point. Yes, if it's going to be for 6 or 7 marks, you can write written representation as a last point. It's fine. But make sure you do not give such points in 4 marks or 3 mark. 3 marks you will not get. Okay, 4 or 5 marks. It's better to avoid such a point because that more than that you can give some reliable sources of evidences, right? So that's the reason I'm telling you. Okay. Now, how should this answer be? Okay. And how should you start answering your substantive procedures? So, first of all, how will you think about writing this answer? Substantive procedures is going to detect the material misstatements, right? So, you're going to obtain an evidence for it. So, you have to think of the assertions first of all. In this question, this is asking you substantive procedures in respect of Frisia company's year-end accrual for employment tax payable. Now, this is going to be, you have to identify whether this is a class of transaction or an account balance. Okay. To know which are the assertions you have to think about. Right. Now, this one will be an account balance as it is a SOFP item. This is the first point you have to remember. When you're reading the question, find out whether it is a class of transaction or an account balance. So which one it is going to affect? It is an SOPL or a SOFP. Now, remember the assertions. So for SOFP, what are the assertions that I have to think of? So basically for the assertions for this account balances would be existence, rights and obligations, um, accuracy, valuation and allocation, completeness, classification and presentation, right? So these are the assertions based on which I can carry out my substantive procedures. Now, this is the first point to help you how to address this question. So now I have found out my assertions. Now I'm starting with my answer. Now, how should your answer be? First of all, I told it should be a complete sentence, right? Now, your substantive procedure answer should tell what to do. It should basically address these two things, what to do and why to do. Remember these two things in your mind, whether to check whether you have written it appropriately. For example, for this question, I would say you can agree the year-end employment tax payable accruals to the payroll records. Okay, let me write it down. Agree the year-end employment tax payable to the payable accrual to the payroll records. Okay. Now, can you end up with this? You will get 1 marks. I would say no, because this is going to address what to do. Okay, what you're going to do, you're going to agree the year-end employment tax payable accrual to the payroll records. That's fine. It's a complete sentence anyway, but you're just listing out what you're going to do. So this will give you only half a mark. Sorry, half mark. Okay. So what should you mention to get the next half mark? Which assertion is it going to confirm? To confirm accuracy. You're basically agreeing the year-end amount, right? So it's going to be to confirm accuracy. Fine. This will earn you half a mark. So this is the why to do part. So what you're going to do, agree year-end employment tax payable accrual to the payroll records. Why am I going to do? To confirm the accuracy. So remember, you have to start from thinking whether it's a class of transaction or an account balance. Then what are the related assertions? So based on that, you're coming out with a point. It's fine. But how are you going to write that point? Remember, you have to write what you're going to do and why you're going to do. Okay, so that's going to give you the total of 1 mark. Fine. Another example could be agree subsequent payments to the post year-end cash book and the bank statement. Okay, so that is also an substantive procedure that you can do. So I have just told what I'm going to do, but why I'm going to do, that will actually tell me whether to confirm completeness. Let me even list out that point. So I'm going to agree any subsequent payment. Sorry about my handwriting. Payment to the post year-end cash book and bank statement. Okay, so this will gain me only half mark because I've mentioned what I'm going to do, but I've not mentioned why I'm going to do. So why I'm going to do this? To confirm which assertion? This is going to be completeness. To check whether it has actually happened, right? Whether it has been completed. So this will gain me half mark. So totally this complete point is going to give me. So your sentence will be agree subsequent payment to the post year-end cash book and bank statement to confirm completeness. So this totally is going to earn me the 1 mark that I needed. So any of your answers relating to the substantive procedures has to be in this form. Okay. Now going to the last part. So this one, describe 2 corporate governance weaknesses faced by Frisia company and provide a recommendation to address each weakness to ensure compliance with corporate governance principles. Okay. So this is again, it's going to be 4 marks. you have to give two things. That is, you have to give the weakness and recommendation. Okay. They have already asked you two corporate governance weakness. So for one corporate governance weakness that you're going to identify, it's going to be 2 marks, which means if you list out the weakness, it's going to be 1 mark, and the recommendation to address the weakness will be 1 mark, right? Um, so it's going to be like this. The CG weakness and recommendation. Okay. So this will earn me 1 mark and this 1 mark. Again, this is the first point. Second weakness that I'm going to find out, this will earn me 1 mark and this is going to be earn me 1 mark. Now, how should you write the weaknesses? Recommendation is fine. It's the same way that I told for deficiency. It's going to be a recommendation. Here, weakness, how should you write the answer? Just listing out the weakness will be fine? No. You have to write what is the weakness and why do you call it a weakness, or what could be the implication of it? Okay, just in a simple sentence. Now, maybe for an example, I'll discuss one point from this. Okay, the listing rules of the stock exchange require compliance with corporate governance principle. Remember, I read the requirement and then I'm going to the scenario. The listing rules of the stock exchange require compliance with corporate governance principles, and the directors of Frisia Company are confident that they are following best practice in relation to this. However, the chairman recently received correspondence from a shareholder who is concerned that the company is not fully compliant. The company's finance director has therefore requested a review of the company's compliance with corporate governance principles. Okay. So far, we have not found out any weakness. Okay. Frisia Company has been listed for over 8 years and its board comprises 4 executive and 4 independent non-executive directors, excluding the chairman. Okay. And an audit committee comprised of the NEDs and the finance director meets each quarter to review the company's internal controls. Yes. Now the weakness arises. They are telling the audit committee comprises of the independent directors as well as a finance director. Finance director cannot be a part of audit committee. Okay, so that is one weakness identified. Why I am telling finance director cannot be part of audit committee? Why am I calling it as a weakness? Audit committee is where it should be comprised of all the NEDs, right? And particularly finance director should not be part of audit committee because he is the person who is responsible for the preparation of financial statements. And being in the audit committee, it would be like a review of their own works, right? So that is the weakness. So I should tell them the answer should be in a way that it should list out the finance director in the audit committee is a weakness and why it is the weakness, because that finance director would be the responsible official for the preparation of financial statements. Okay, so completely I have to tell what is the weakness and why it is the weakness or the implication. Then I have to recommend finance director should resign from the audit committee. Okay, so that could be the recommendation. So this is going to earn you the complete 1 mark here for weakness. Clear? Um, Fine. Now, that's the end of this question, 30 marks question. Okay. I will continue with the 20 marks question, 20 marks question in the next video. Okay, thank you.